Welcome everyone to this Kingdom Finance session today. I've called it Digital Rapture, something we've talked about before, and I'm going to talk about some issues surrounding that. I'll probably keep the screen on for a little bit just to share some graphs, but and we'll turn it off. What are we talking about Kingdom Finance? We always have to keep in mind that the kingdom means we're in a kingdom. We have a king. We're set free to serve. That's the fundamentals of the course that we've all taken. Set free to serve, not set free to self-actualize, not set free to be our best self. Those may be ancillary benefits, but we are set free to serve. We are his workmanship. We're his bondservants. We've gone from one kingdom into another kingdom. We've exchanged one yoke of servitude for another yoke of servitude. He just says his yoke is easy and his burden is light, and it's blessing all the way. So we're just going to do a little bit of a catch up on where things are at. I think this is probably going to form a longer presentation that I'll need to do. There's just so many things going on. I think the body of Christ needs to be aware of all of this stuff, right? They just need to have some kind of a metric for it, because otherwise they're sitting along and all this stuff happens and they wonder what in blazes is going on in the world around us. How is it going to hell in a handbasket so quickly? What is this stuff all about? How did we go in many of these nations talking about whether gay marriage should be legal to being arrested for saying there's something wrong with gay marriage? You know, all of this kind of stuff. Where are we at? So that's all part of the Build Back Better New World Order framework. Some people talk about cabals and secret organizations, and we're going to just touch on some of these things. We have to just set the landscape first. And what is the landscape of this? We have Satan and demonic forces. We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but principalities, powers, rulers of darkness, spiritual wickedness in high places. That's Ephesians 6:12. There's an enemy out there that's operating to a master plan that has been going on for a long, long time. It's not something new. It's not something new. There's revelation that comes, there's exposure that comes, but it's not something new. So we have to think about it this way. Somewhere out there is a demonic controlling mind, controlling plan, agenda. There's something that's driving it. That's why you have sex trafficking in countries that people aren't coordinating it. You've got evil in all kinds of countries that people aren't coordinating it, right? You've got this stuff happening. There is a plan. Remember, Daniel prayed and he spoke about and we heard from the angel about the demonic principality, the prince of Persia, in the battle in the heavenlies against the archangel. Right. There is this battle going on over jurisdictions and areas and rulership. There's demonic rulers and principalities, territorial powers, territorial spirits, things that are going on. Right. It says we're tempted when we're drawn away by our lusts and enticed, but the enemy comes to us, right, in some occasions. So how does this happen? There's three voices, remember, that speak to us. There's our own voice, which usually says, I need this, I need that, I want this, I should be, right? There's the heavenly voice, God's voice that speaks to us all the time through the Holy Spirit that we need to learn to listen to. And then there's the satanic voice that comes to us, thoughts unbidden. You can choose to accept those. If you entertain those as your thoughts, then you're entertaining Satan. Hey, eat from this apple. Did God really say that it wasn't for you to eat? Is that true? There's this demonic voice that comes to us from out, and it comes as our own voice. So we have to learn to differentiate and discern those things. But make no mistake, there's demonic rulers and principalities. Now we get to the level that most people talk about. Overt evildoers, cabals, globalists, whatever you want to call them. And I'm uncertain in terms of proof as to what extent these things really exist. But I do know they exist at the next level up. And I think what confuses people here and gets people into a lot of conspiracy stuff that maybe they don't need to get into, is there is a conspiracy. There's demonic rulers and principalities dealing with their minions. I'm not necessarily saying that Nancy Pelosi was on the phone with Chairman Xi in China because they're both part of a secret organization to release the COVID virus at a certain time so that they could have an impact on the US election. I'm not saying that happened. Maybe it did. I'm not saying that happened. But I am saying that alignment of events was orchestrated by someone. And people knew how to take advantage of it. There's demonic rulers and principalities. But I think it would be naive to say that there aren't people that have sold their soul to Satan. We know about the leaven of the Pharisees. We know the leaven of Herod. We know that these people, Jesus said to them directly, "You're of your father, the devil. He was a murderer, and so are you." Right? There is that kind of connection that people partner with him to destroy the works of Jesus, just like we partner with Jesus to destroy the works of Satan. If you think about Jesus' murder or execution, crucifixion, I don't think it would be fair to say that the Pontius Pilate was secretly in a cabal with the Judaizers and the high priests. Right? But they were all kind of minions, being puppets, being directed by puppeteers, and those puppeteers are demonic rulers and principalities. So we have silent partners and minions. You're of your father, the devil. Think of them as minions. I like that, particularly since the movie. See these little yellow things running around. And underneath that, you have just general run-of-the-mill evildoers, right? So you have kind of a hierarchy. Now, the reason people put too much faith in conspiracy theories is because they've denied the existence of the demonic supernatural realm. They've denied the existence of Satan's controlling mind or controlling plan. So they're attributing to men the works of Satan. They're attributing to men the works of Satan. Just as in many cases, because people don't believe in Satan or evil forces, they attribute to God the works of Satan. They say, "Oh, I had a bad accent. God must not have liked me today. I guess God wanted to take me through this trial to teach me something. I guess God has stolen my money, or God never gave my family any money." You get the blaming of God for the works of the enemy in our life. So this is the collapse of a complex system that we're talking about. We're talking about what I've called is nothing to see here. There's this, we're in the middle of this collapse of a complex system. There's the creaking chair, I call it, or the knocking motor in your car. You know that's creaking, you know it's knocking, you know it's going to go, you don't know when. Because this is not a simple system. This is like the rise and fall of the Roman Empire. How long does it take for full dark ages to begin and start? We're in the middle of this collapse. We're in the middle of a banking crisis. Evidence of it was Silicon Valley Bank, UBS, Credit Suisse. There's more banks since then, and there's huge borrowing. I'm going to get the charts and the statistics updated on some of these things because I mentioned this before. BRICS movement, Brazil, Russia, India, China, Saudi Arabia, and other countries now beyond, moving to the de-dollarization, shifting from the US dollar as a reserve currency. And accelerated by US action during the Ukraine war, fiscally obscene actions of the ruling elite. Now they're talking about doing something that would completely destroy the US dollar as the reserve currency, which is taking government reserves in US dollars held by Russia, stealing them, and then giving them to the enemy of Russia in the middle of a war into Ukraine. That would be suicide, of course, but it would be something they never even did to Nazi Germany. This would be the destruction of the primacy of the US dollar system, which is part of the stability of the framework that we have, which is why I talk about this collapse of the US dollar as something we need to watch. We also going to hit just randomly a few issues. The digital rapture I spoke about, right? Well, the central thesis of the digital rapture is that you don't do business with people who hate you. You don't do business with people that hate you. You don't build on a platform that will cancel you. You don't eat on a restaurant where you know they'll spit on your food. So let's give a current example, case study, YouTube versus Rumble. A lot of Christians on YouTube. I'm on YouTube, but I'm also on Rumble. Rumble is, I've made the primary source, YouTube as a backup. Why? Shocking turn of events. This is a quote from London Real, conservative guy. Our 12-year journey with London Real on YouTube has been erased. The stats speak for themselves. 13,000 videos, 2.2 million subscribers, 350 million views, all now inaccessible since September. And now they're reaching out with urgency to see if anybody can restore what? Restore their business, restore their identity, restore their ability to speak to people, 2.2 million subscribers that they've lost completely their connection with. And you can go story after story after story on this, exactly this happening, right? Another example was Steve Bannon. He said that they needed to see some Democrats head on the pike, figuratively, of course. He was making a quotation to historical events. And he was permanently canceled for inciting violence against the left. Everybody looking at what he said, it's a complete joke, but it was a lever, it was a pretext to get him canceled with no recourse. No recourse. They just say go somewhere else, but traditionally there has been nowhere else to go. Nothing to see here. We've got CBDCs being issued, government-issued cryptocurrencies belonging to the government. It sets rules for circulation, right? Basically, that allows them to see everything you're doing, when you're doing it, where you're doing it, and to have levers to turn your money off if you're doing something they don't like. It creates a dynamic that hasn't existed up till now. Encroachments on privacy right, because money becomes a tool of policy. Money right now is fairly neutral. I can give my money to the church if I want. If God tells me, like if I'm the widow's mite and tells me to give my last 2 mites in the offering, I can do that as an act of faith. You won't be able to do that in a new world order where they don't believe the church is a valid recipient of money when you don't have that much, right? Hang on. We're not going to let Johnny do that because he might become ward of the state. We need to make sure that goes into the pension funds that we manage. We're going to govern what you do, when you do it, how you do it. It becomes a tool of policy. It becomes a tool to deal with dis and misinformation. You can't give your money to certain places. Books could be made ineligible for purchase using CBDC. Hang on, that book's critical of COVID or vaccination processes or our LGBTQ rights theologies or any other mechanism of government. Environmental policy, 15-minute cities could be linked to your money. Hang on, you're spending money out of your zone. You're spending money out of your zone. Environmental policy could prevent travel spend, excess of cancel culture. It allows the power to do it crazy. I just wanted to make a couple of parallels here. I'm going to develop more of these slides. I was trying to find all of the updated slides for a talk that I'd given before, but I want to just at least make these. You can see 2 spikes on the discount window for the Federal Reserve here. 2024 and 2004 to 2008. And the point I'm making is we are back at the same level that we were during the crash of 2007, virtually the same level. And that should speak to us of a danger zone that we're entering into right now. Right now. This is where the banks go to get their cheap money to keep themselves afloat. If you remember, that was a banking crisis. So we seem to have come back to where we were, much worse even than during the height of the COVID era. We are in what some have called, I apologize for the blurriness, it's from Real Investment Advice. I tried to get the not the screenshot, but the actual slide. It'll take me a little bit more digging to find it. but we're in the middle of a financial sector bubble. And this is an interesting chart. US, of course, but we track so closely on many of these things. The red part of that is the real GDP, the real gross domestic product, things that people are making, right? If I take some raw materials and I make this pen and I sell it, that's GDP. Something's actually being created. There's something happening in the economy. The red part of this is the financial sector. People flipping notes, flipping money, flipping changes, flip of money based on quantitative easing. And you can see where we are now. They called it the everything bubble. The freak out everything bubble. The financial crisis is in the middle of that slide. Can you, Johnny, can you wave at me and say, can you see that slide? Or I'm sorry. Let me just go back to screen sharing here 1 second. There we go. I better go back to the last slide quickly and just show it to you. That's the slide I was talking about, the discount weight primary credit rate. So what we have there is the bubble of the 6, 7, 8. We are at the same mountain right now in time, the same place. Many people have said that the 2007 crisis, the Great Recession, as they called it, has not stopped. They just have kept printing money like mad to stop it impacting us. That's why we're approaching 30 trillion of debt in the US, other places. But this is an example of what I'm talking about. This slightly blurry slide, I'll get you cleaner examples. This shows real household net worth versus GDP. And it talks about the financial. The red part is the financial finagling, if you want to call it. The blue part is the real domestic product. So you can see that compared to the middle of it, which is the 2007 crisis, the Great Recession, we are in a dramatically overheated financial bubble. And I'll be digging more out at a future event to talk a little bit more about that. There's a couple of good people to be hearing from on this, and there's a lot more I wanted to share on some of these slides. But I just wanted to let you know that, hang on, if you thought 2007 was bad, we are in what they called an everything bubble. But then somebody said, oh, but the stock market's doing not too bad. And this is another interesting slide. I'll explain it to you because it's kind of hard to see. But the black line is the quantitative easing. Quantitative easing is printing of money, let's call it, right? Massive money printing. And you've got COVID. COVID is sort of 3/4 of the way through. And you can see that the lines go off the charts. So what's happening is not real economic growth that's bailing these companies out. It's massive money printing that makes it look like things are going well. That's why the top layer of rich are getting richer, because they're getting a percentage of this money going through their hands. As it comes from our masters and filters, that doesn't filter down. It just moves between people and they take percentages each time they do it. Much like a medium-term note works. You have a 100 million medium-term note. The pension fund buys the medium-term note, but the banks make percentages on the way through. So their income is from moving paper that didn't exist yesterday into the hands of the public in an inflationary manner, and their profits, therefore, are fabricated. They're profits in the air. And that creates this press on the richest companies to do better during the crisis. And you can see, I like this chart because it tracks some of these companies directly on the quantitative easing line. And the economic analysis that I was listening to in relation to this is that those bubbles are going to crash and these companies are going to fail. The creaking chair analogy. The creaking chair analogy. So we have unstable monetary policies. We have financial discrimination and debanking. demoneying, which is where you are being debanked. Your ID is you being used and connected to creditworthiness. It becomes a system of control. They want you to have this whole process of being connected through your money to the power of government in a way that you haven't been before. The other trend to look at, just going to talk a little bit about the AI crash. AI is just a tool. All right, I know we maybe need to spend some time on AI and big data and some of these things to bring people up to speed, but AI is again, it's just a tool. It can be a tool for good, it can be a tool for evil, but like many tools, it allows people to do things they couldn't do. Where it is going to impact in this is like an industrial revolution, is the need for coders and other layers of economic workers are going to be heavily impacted by AI as it moves forward. It is like an industrial revolution. And that's starting to move through the cycles of impact. So as we have this creaking, we're having less need for people because the people have put their wealth into AI, and this is driving things forward. There's an AI crash coming. And I'll give you more details on that as we move forward. Here's a title based on what we spoke about before. Conservatives vent fury as GoFundMe cancels Canadian truckers' fundraiser. So you have a choice when you're going out. You've got GoFundMe and you've got Give, Send, Go. One's Christian, one's non-Christian. And we have a battle because what's happening is many of these companies that we're dealing with will simply cancel you on a moment's notice if you don't adhere to their values, which are starting to be implemented. Or the government phones them and says, hey, these people don't adhere to your bill. Why are you having anti-LGBTQ people staying in your place doing your stuff? And you get shut down. So I'll circulate this picture. I don't know if you can see it, but there's a Give, Send, Go now for the publication of Kingdom Finance books with a nifty picture of me. And that's why we want to support people that will support us and not cancel us. Not that they're perfect, not that they're doing stuff great, but we do have evidence and deep evidence of how companies are being used as tools of the left, tools of government, and shutting down Christians. Give, Send, Go sent me this email. I loved it. The heading was Give, Send, Go. Let your life so shine before men that they could see your good works and glorify the Father in heaven. Matthew 5:16. Consider us your campaign partners. So very, very nice ethos. So what are some of these other issues that I just wanted to highlight today? We need to be aware of what lawfare is. The best example of that right now is to look at what's going on with Trump. I think he's got 70 cases with a total jeopardy of 700 years in prison. The lawyers that worked with him are all being targeted. If you went to work on a case, you're being referred to the bar. They're trying to disbar everybody that's ever decided to work with him, shut him off from the ability to obtain legal services. And one of the ways that they do that, of course, is they ensure that if the conflicts mean that anybody big firm representing the government or wanting some time to represent the government can never represent somebody that might be opposed to the government. Conflicts of interest rules. So you have lawfare, and that lawfare, the Trump is the biggest example of that. I think the New York case is the most shocking. His people give documentation to say that the assets on which they're asking a loan are worth 100. The banks look at these assets and their lawyers say, well, okay, well, that's fine. Or they have the opportunity to say, no, we think they're worth 50, but there's a negotiation about what this collateral is worth. And this is all done through accountants and lawyers and opinions. It's not Trump sitting with in his kitchen deciding what number to put on it. These numbers are put on by professionals that are fully retained. And then the banks lend the money and they get paid back with interest. The banks are really happy. They want Trump to be an ongoing client. Trump's happy. He borrowed the money and got it back. There's no victims. Yet that's the basis upon which they're charging him $500 million in penalties and banning him and his sons from doing business in New York. What is that about? It's blatant election interference, blatant political action, blatant using the courts in a manner for which they're not intended. And what do we say as Christians? Let justice roll like a river. And this is not justice. So we're seeing the erosion of systems that we would have had some hope in because they were founded in countries based on Judeo-Christian beliefs, based on things that we care about. And we're seeing these things be destroyed and eroded. And many businesses are now leaving New York as a result. But what happens is good people leave, evil flourishes, and you have things turning down this dangerous road. So that's a form of cancel culture, but it's very, very difficult. And they use RICO and other statutes, other mechanisms to treat everybody as if we're in a conspiracy. So they would say, hang on, there's a 7,000 conspiracy to raise money to oppress people. Right? And you're all co-conspirators because we're conspiring to believe or to advance causes that are contrary to what left-wing radicals hold to be self-evident and true. And that's kind of the mechanism that we're talking about, lawfare. That's why one of the things the 7,000 talks about, and hopefully we can move from talk to action, is a massive fund to fight this kind of stuff. If you're going to put your head above the parapet, we need to have a fund that will fight. And there are some examples, but nothing at the level that I'm talking about. Cancel culture. We also have something called the deep state and the administrative state. I think there's crossover, but I think they are different things. The administrative state is something that exists no matter who's in power. If you ever watched Yes Minister, Yes Prime Minister, you'll see there's permanent secretaries, there's this whole cadre of people. And what's happened by and large, not completely, in Canada, the US, and the United Kingdom, and many other Western nations, is the long march of communism, the long march of socialism has dominated those spaces so that they hold the levers of power in many cases. Trump's elected, but he couldn't do anything because in many cases he couldn't do anything because these people said yes but did no. Said yes but did no. I remember being in the High Commission in London when Harper was the prime minister, and the shock and horror of some of the officials there said, oh my God, we just have to wait till these conservative lunatics leave. And basically we'll hinder and hamper anything they're doing. Hopefully they don't do too much damage. Oh my goodness, what do we do? Our long-term agenda wasn't just being driven by the political party in power, but they were being driven by these establishment levers of power. And what's happened in certain places, certainly I think what's happened in the States, I can give you some great books to read on this, is that's become institutionalized in a way that nobody ever imagined it could. It's not just the administrative state, it becomes a deep state. It's your agencies, your security services, everybody that's spying on people, and you create this whole machine designed to perpetuate a particular set of views or points of view, which broadly speaking are generally the exact opposite of what we would think of as kingdom. Generally opposite of kingdom. So let me just break that down a little bit. What's happening now is, okay, Biden and his crowd are in, this is an example of people being in some form of power, but what's happening is millions if not billions, are being drawn down and then provided outside government to charities, NGOs, kind of political actions to promote democracy, to promote equality. So what they're promoting is perhaps the LGBTQ, the trans agenda. They're promoting open borders, open migration. They're promoting all of the anti-democratic election stuff that we've seen happen in the United States. Why? Because it's perpetuating power. You're seeing a link between the state that can't do a lot because of the rules that we've kept it under, outsourcing activities which would be very proscribed for the state, but outsourcing them to Facebook. Hey, we can't shut William Abraham down, but Facebook, you can. Here's a list of our disinformation, misinformation people. You know, William said this thing about the LGBTQ agenda one day. You know, he could be a spreader. Maybe he could cross the line. Let's suppress his site down. Let's do this stuff. Again, don't do business with people that hate you. And that's what happened in Twitter, Rumble, all of these people. Liz Truss spoke about this administrative state at the CPAC conference. It's actually worth going and looking at her remarks, fairly fresh, basically saying that once you get into a position, you can't really do much because the administrative state is holding the levers of power. What this has done is it's led to a concentration of wealth and power, ever increasing concentration of wealth and power in a smaller and smaller elite who we generally refer to as the globalist elites. And this, I'll get you some graphs for it. This has been a shocking shift, right? It's been a shocking shift. And what COVID did is allowed those elites to view us as units. If we do this to 10 million people, so many will die, but that's okay. We can do this. You know, now they're saying, okay, what do we do when this creaking chair crashes, when the economy shifts? We need to be getting people into feeding them bug protein, all this kind of crazy stuff going along. Their agendas must be implemented because they know better. And that leads to what I would call the destruction of the foundation of certainly the societies that we understand. So you have a UN-driven open borders migration, which has led to, in the United States, 10 million people coming into the United States since Biden was elected. Broadly uneducated, many criminals, a very difficult migration pattern. 80% of them don't speak Spanish. So if you think it's because there's some problem down in the Americas, it's not. There's Somalia everywhere else. So open borders, migration. Many of them much wealthier than people in the United States that are struggling, or in UK that are struggling because they've had to spend 20 grand to cartel and criminals to make these journeys and fly cross-border. So, you know, we're not helping the refugees that we want to help. We're creating an open borders migration status funded by the charities and the United Nations that's facilitating it. We see that now on our streets, the changing demographics on our street, but nobody's talking about it because they wouldn't want to fuel disinformation or misinformation, or maybe somebody would say something in a racial context that people might object to, then we'd have to cancel them for being a racist. But make no mistake, this is a major issue, UN-driven migration, immigration. Another issue we're going to have to be tracking more carefully is the cult of climate change. I'm a big believer in the environment and doing things great. I actually was set up the London Climate Change Service Providers Group many years ago. I was one of the people involved in the setup of that, founding participant. Hosted and spoke at the first conference, the first event. Well, because I do believe in the environment and that we have to do things better. But it's not that the extremist cult of the climate change, it would take away our fuel and have people starving in the dark, freezing in the dark, destroying the prosperity of our life. That's a cultic kind of dynamic that allows people to say there's an existential threat, therefore Existential threats need existential solutions, which means totalitarian style state control. So we have people bleating on about democracy. Oh, democracy. Oh my God, what would happen to democracy if Trump was real? Oh, what would happen if the conservatives or these type of conservatives were elected, the Alternative for Deutschland or some of these? Oh my God, what would happen to these people? That would be the end of democracy. Well, they're not talking about democracy because they're talking about people that were democratically elected. I call it, from an American perspective, I call it democratocracy. Is similar, but what they mean is the ruling elites, the ruling power elites would lose their power. So what's happening is much like we've seen in Soviet era and in Pakistan and places like that, where the ruling party puts the other party in jail, charges them with crimes, puts them in jail, tries to stop their ability, if not outright. I mean, the ultimate of that is if you can't put them in a gulag, you kill them. And of course, the predicate for killing Trump has already been laid out. There have been people talking about him like Caesar, whereas Brutus. So we have this whole kind of press to preserve democracy. We might have to kill people if the democratically elected people aren't the ones that we like. Canada, prime example. How does such a soft, gentle country like mine become so totalitarian and so crazy? I don't know. Australia is similar. They call it deradicalization. They want to de-radicalize. We all want to de-radicalize, but they're not de-radicalizing the crazy Muslims. They're de-radicalizing the mainstream political people, the majority of the population that don't hold with their crazy views. So our Justice Minister, Arif Virani, was quoted as saying, putting Canadians under house arrest under suspicion they will commit a hate crime in the future will help to de-radicalize people who are learning things online. And they've shut down conservative websites online because they don't want people to learn things online, learn things like maybe the vaccine wasn't what it was supposed to be, learn things that might be contrary to the government's position. So we all believe in de-radicalization, but they want to de-radicalize the church because we might not believe in their trans agenda. They want to protect children from their parents who might not want to see them groomed and sexualized at 4 years old and then led into a sex change cult, a trans sex change cult. De-radicalize away from crazy people who might not believe in abortion, who may not want to use someone's preferred pronouns. That would be a hate crime. So you might be locked up because you might not be willing, you might offend some poor person in a hate crime by not using their preferred pronouns. It gives the state more power to oppress in lockdowns. Sounds great, execution bad. And we have a government, certainly in Canada, that put the Emergency Powers Act effectively to suspend the rule of law against protesters that were offended by his his lockdown of under COVID. Yet there was absolutely no problem with extended marches and destruction of property on Black Lives Matter marches. So it's a politically driven agenda. So what really happening is they're making being conservative, the Judeo-Christian foundation of our life, they're making that illegal, ever increasingly making that illegal. Not only that, saying stuff has a chilling effect, which means people don't want to express their opinions. They don't want to say that they don't agree with something that's crazy. They don't want to say the chilling effect of discourse, because it isn't like you're having a discussion about these points. A few years ago, we're having a discussion in the nation I'm in right now about whether or not gay marriage would be allowed. There was a pro voice, there was a con voice. Both were strong, many times respectful, once in a while not, but there was this ongoing debate. As soon as the one side has won, they want to make it a hate crime to say anything against that discussion. They never want to have open again. They want to make it a hate crime. So what we have to do is to say, hang on, these are the issues we're facing, and in the context of the righteous standard, we have to raise it up. The headline, sorry, on that last one is from the Globe and Mail Justice Minister defends house arrest power for people feared to commit a hate crime in future. Whoopi Goldberg, a picture of her there looking quite weird, suggests that Biden, of course that's the left-wing mouthpiece of the United States, could throw every Republican in jail. So this is not dealing with normal people, normal ways. This is violence. This is out and out political warfare. It's beyond anything that people can imagine. We are not dealing the way that we have dealt with stuff in the past. It is a battle. People identified as legal protesters, they were identified by advanced facial recognition, phone, and GPS data. Right? Jobs were taken away due to their vax status. If you made likes in Canada and in Australia, people were visited in their homes by the police for liking stuff on social media that was contrary to the government's policy. People were arrested in their homes for posts, vaccine injury or damage. Emergence of misinformation is as a thing. And misinformation, disinformation is basically anything that's counter to the dominant narrative of the day. We have this emergence I spoke about of the unholy alliance between big tech, media, social media, government, and science. So giving these agencies the power of the state and the state the overreaching potential of social control. That's never been seen outside the CCP, USSR, other totalitarian states. I think if you remember in times past, I showed you what the requirements are for a warrant for the government to breach your privacy. They're extreme. Government doesn't need to worry about that now. They just get somebody in private sector who has all that data to give it to them. The other thing is, we saw this in the Trump case, they weren't allowed to do certain illegal acts in the United States, so the Democrat Party had those acts done outside the United States to set up the Russia hoax. Again, you know, the book by Kash Patel, I would recommend, Government Gangsters, probably one of the better ones to look at in the way that this stuff was done. We've got a state religion of scientism, which is unquestioned adherence to a dominant view. That's never been what science is about. Science is about challenge and query and testing hypotheses and retesting, and it's supposed to be continually tested. Instead, when you put it into the levers of politics and power in the context of what we've seen, it becomes a religion. The application of force to require belief in views on sexuality and orientation. That's the hate speech. That's the anti-conversion laws. That's the potential house arrest under a peace bond in Canada to stop people from being able to be out in society because, oh my God, these people might be Christian conservatives. Martial law. The January 6th narrative, I think, is an excellent example. You had a bit of a riot. I think a lot of it was provoked. One, you provoke it by having insufficient security, and two, you provoke it by having agent provocateurs, but certainly stuff went on that shouldn't have gone on. But then you try and create a narrative of this being some kind of an insurrection, which is, I think, laughable on its face. I mean, the last time the Canadians and British invaded the White House, we burned it down. I don't think that would be missed. So there's so much more that I think that we need to track. Phones are being tracked, insurance being canceled, businesses destroyed, scorched earth policy, no bail, maximum charges, violence. Process is becoming the punishment. We're getting people canceled. Airbnb canceled people that are going for Christian events. They canceled the family of a conservative voice on YouTube. All of this kind of stuff is happening. All of this kind of stuff is happening. Why do we need to know about it? What do we do about it? We need to know about it because people just are floating by. And part of the message of the 7,000 has been to wake up. Part of the message of a watchman is to wake up. Part of the message of a watchman is to shout. We have people that we are going to be connected to or are connected to now in the 7,000 that have callings. Remember, there are people that have works that they're called to walk in. Works to walk. God is raising up. God does not, where evil abounds, grace much more abounds. God has his Jonathans rising up. He has his Davids rising up. He has his Gideons rising up. He has his Noahs coming to eliminate. He has his Jobs. Job broke the jaw of the oppressor. These are people that are coming up. They're going to be in our circles. We have to wake them up, because right now people are sleeping and slumbering. They don't know where they're going. They don't know what they're doing or saying. And we need to continue to wake these people up. Why do we wake them up? Because there's a calling. And right now people's callings are restricted. There's a calling across all of them. I was going to go into the 14 gates teaching. Maybe we'll continue that another time. But we have the 14 gates teaching, which is really that there's heavenly alignments in all the areas of influence that we're talking about where this horrible stuff is going on. There's heavenly alignments that God is making in all of these places. And what we need to do is to be continuing to build the 7,000 other organizations doing similar things. We're not the only one. But within our context, within our worldview, we need to be finding the people that have the callings to deal with these issues, right? I don't know that I'm called to deal with the trans issue. I want to know about it. I want to know what's happening, but that isn't necessarily but guess what? There'll be people that are called. There'll be Stevens that are called, mighty voices in a space to speak about stuff. And that's what we need to find and launch. Let me put it this way. I'll read a scripture. Once again, a message came to me from the Lord. Son of man, give your people this message. When I bring an army against a country, so what we're talking about is an army of all this crazy stuff coming against us. The people of that land choose one of their own to be a watchman. When the watchman sees the enemy coming, he sounds the alarm to warn the people. Then if those who hear the alarm refuse to take action, it is their own fault if they die. They heard the alarm but ignored it, so the responsibility of theirs. If they had listened to the warning, they could have saved their lives. But if the watchman sees the enemy coming and doesn't sound the alarm to warn the people, then he's responsible for their captivity. They will die in their sins, but I will hold the watchman accountable or responsible for their deaths. Goes on, this is Ezekiel 33. Now, son of man, I'm making you a watchman for the people of Israel. 7,000 are Elijah watchmen. So read this for ourselves. Therefore, listen to what I say and warn them for me. If I announce that some wicked people are sure to die and you fail to tell them, the wicked people he's talking about, to change their ways, then they will die in their sins, and I will hold you responsible for their deaths. But if you warn them to repent and they don't repent, they will die in their sins, but you will have saved yourself. Guess what? That is part of our calling. We need to, one, speak to people to warn them of the army that is coming. God has appointed us to be those people. Look at this. Look at this issue. Look at the cancel culture. Who's going to rise up with the Airbnb alternative for Christians because we can't have places to stay? What all digital rapture elements are going to be created to battle this stuff? And how do we motivate that and fund it and create money to make these things happen? That's kind of what we're talking about. We're not called to fight in the outhouse with these people. We're called to be watchmen on the wall, shouting out the challenge to people in relation to their lives. We're going to bring this truth. We're going to raise a righteous standard. But to raise a righteous standard, we have to be people that are aware of what's going on. I'm going to go through these major issues of the day, maybe in writing, maybe in various blogs, so that people can see the truth. Here's the facts of the cancel culture. Here's the facts of how this stuff is working out, because it's shocking. Why? Because we need to motivate people to rise up. 7,000 has a role in that. We've talked about the 14 gates. We've talked about building funds to make this stuff happen. And all I can do is, like Mary, say, wow, that's a big baby you're talking about bringing forward. All I can say is, be it unto me according to your word. We're here to do what God wants us to do. You are here to do what God has called you to do. And the callings of you guys the callings of every man and woman that's listening to my voice, the callings are going to spread across the spectrum of things that we're talking about here. There's absolutely no doubt in my mind, that each area that I've spoken about, God is raising up people. When the drought is coming, when the famine is coming, God raises a Joseph with Joseph's house for storage. Like these Goshens people are talking about. There's voices being raised up. So first step, wake up. Second step, realize that you're a watchman to shout this stuff up. Third step, what works are you called to walk in? Right? What works? You can't just shout. Like maybe I was shouting the first half of this. You can't just throw your remote at the TV. What area of this are you called to deal with? What boards can you get on? Where do you need to have your voice raised? How do you do it? How do you get the issues articulated in a way that you can understand them and so that you can speak them out? So we need to have this stuff understood, curated, have the arguments right so that we can have a position and a place. So, Father, I just pray that even this session of sort of skittering around what the enemy is doing opens our minds again to the fact that we're in a battle, opens our mind to the fact that we have to find the people that you're leading, that you're bringing forward to empower in these various areas. Father, help us to create this end times kingdom army that we can lock shoulders, lock shields with, to move forward and take the territory that you want to have take. Let us, Father, be righteous watchmen, we pray, in the name of Jesus.